What if I told you Tony Stark isn't done yet? What if I told you that the legacy of Iron Man, the hero who started it all in the MCU, isn't over, but is about to reach its most mind-blowing twist yet? And here's the kicker. What if Robert Downey Jr. comes back? Not just as Iron Man, but also as Dr. Doom. Could the man who gave birth to the MCU also be the one to tear it apart and put it back together again? And in a twist worthy of a Shakespearean tragedy, could Tony Stark kill a version of himself, literally, in the multiversal madness of Avengers Secret Wars? That's the theory we're diving into today, and trust me, it's not just a fan wish. It's rooted in narrative setups, multiversal logic, Marvel's long-term storytelling strategy, and the very nature of Robert Downey Jr.'s bond with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So grab your arc reactor and let's explore how Iron Man could return in Avengers Doomsday's post-credit scene and set the stage for the most dramatic moment in MCU history: Tony Stark killing Dr. Doom. Let's rewind to where we left off. In Avengers Endgame, Tony Stark made the ultimate sacrifice. With a single snap, he saved the universe, defeating Thanos at the cost of his life. Fans accepted this as a perfect ending, poetic, emotional, and powerful. But if Marvel has taught us anything, it's that no one is ever truly gone, especially in a multiverse. This isn't just a loophole. It's a storytelling device that Marvel has been building toward for over a decade. The Multiverse saga isn't just about fan service or variant cameos. It's about exploring the consequences of alternate choices, identities, and destinies. And there's no better character to embody that than Tony Stark. So imagine this: Avengers. Doomsday ends in a climactic battle across collapsing timelines and colliding realities. As the dust settles, the screen cuts to black and then fades into a secret lab, illuminated only by the faint blue glow of arc reactor technology. A figure steps into frame. It's unmistakable: Robert Downey Jr. But he's not Tony Stark. Or is he? That's the post-credit scene that will send the MCU into chaos. Because this version of Stark, this variant, isn't the Iron Man we knew. He's darker, more composed. And when he turns, revealing a mask forged in Latverian steel and powered by Stark tech, we realize the truth. This is Dr. Doom. A variant from a universe where Tony Stark's intellect, arrogance, and trauma didn't lead him to heroism, but to domination. This Doom isn't Victor Von Doom, at least not in the traditional sense. He's a fusion, Tony Doom, a universe where Tony inherited Latveria, perhaps adopted Victor's legacy, or simply became his own tyrant after losing everything. Now you might ask, why cast RDJ in both roles? Marvel doesn't make choices like that lightly. Robert Downey Jr. is more than an actor in the MCU, he's an anchor. If Marvel wants Secret Wars to be their Endgame times 10, they need stakes that feel personal, tragic, and transformative. What better way than to pit Tony Stark against himself? But let's unpack how we get there. The groundwork is already being laid. From Loki and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness to Spider-Man No Way Home, we've seen how dangerous variants can be. We've seen heroes meet darker versions of themselves. Stephen Strange met multiple variations, and even Wanda became her own villain in a way. So, introducing a Tony Stark variant who becomes the MCU's version of Dr. Doom is not only plausible, it's narratively perfect. In the comics, Dr. Doom is often a twisted reflection of Tony Stark. Both men of genius-level intellect, both driven by ego, trauma, and a deep-seated desire for control. Doom's greatest weapon has never been just his armor or magic. It's his belief that he should be the one to run things because he knows best. Sound familiar? Tony has flirted with those same tendencies. Think of Ultron, the Sokovia Accords, the surveillance programs. Now take away the lessons he learned, the love of Pepper, the grounding friendship of the Avengers. What do you have? A Tony who never found balance. A Tony who fell. That's your Dr. Doom. And now imagine that variant escaping his dying universe as incursions tear realities apart. He sees Earth 616, our MCU, as a new canvas. He's smarter than any villain we've faced because he knows every Stark move before it happens. He's you, but better. He's the final boss in a multiversal game of chess. But where does our Tony come from then? How is he alive to fight him? This is where Avengers Doomsday's post-credit scene becomes more than just a tease. It's the door opening for the real return. There's a hidden pocket of the multiverse, call it the sacred archive, the temporal refuge, whatever, where fragments of dead timelines are stored. It's here that remnants of heroes and villains linger, preserved like echoes. And it's here that a fragment of our Tony Stark remains, pulled from the moment before the snap, or reconstructed from the time heist echoes. Whether it's Kang tech, strange magic, or some other multiversal anomaly, this version of Tony isn't quite alive, but he's not dead either. And when Doom Tony threatens the core multiverse in Secret Wars, this Tony is awakened, not as a god, not as a savior, but as a weapon. The only one who can think like Doom, the only one who can stop him. Now here's where it gets deeply emotional. Tony isn't just facing another villain. He's facing the darkest reflection of himself. He sees everything he could have become. Every bad choice, every time he played God. And Doom isn't some mustache-twirling tyrant. He believes he's right. He looks Tony in the eye and says, "You always thought you were saving the world. I did." This isn't just a battle of suits. It's a battle of philosophies. Doom wants to reshape the multiverse in his image, efficient, orderly, flawless. No mistakes, no chaos. Tony knows that's not life. It's tyranny. But can he defeat someone who is him, without losing the very soul he died to protect? And here's the twist. He might not make it out. This isn't about resurrecting Tony forever. It's about giving him the chance to end things his way, to stop the version of himself that could undo everything. And in the climax of Secret Wars, when the battle rages in the heart of a collapsing multiverse, Tony dons his final suit, not to win, but to end it. He confronts Doom in a scene that mirrors his showdown with Thanos, except this time, it's personal. He tells Doom, "You were always smarter, but you forgot one thing. I know how this ends." And then, he kills him. Not out of hatred, but out of necessity, out of understanding. It's not a heroic kill, it's a tragic mercy. One final act to save not just the universe, but his legacy. And in doing so, he completes the arc that began in 2008. Not just the man who built a suit in a cave, but the man who understood that power, unchecked, destroys. Robert Downey Jr. playing both sides of this story isn't just fan service, it's thematic brilliance. It's a masterclass in duality, sacrifice, and redemption. It ties the beginning of the MCU to its multiversal climax in the most poetic way possible. Tony Stark becomes his own greatest enemy and his own salvation. This is how Marvel shocks the world. By doing something bold, something meaningful. They don't bring back Iron Man just for nostalgia. They bring him back to finish the saga. And let's not forget, Secret Wars is about convergence, about all realities collapsing. It's the perfect opportunity to bring back legacy heroes, alternate versions, and give emotional closure to stories we thought were over. A returning Tony doesn't cheapen Endgame, it deepens it. It says even after death, your choices echo. Your soul persists. And sometimes, only you can stop yourself. RDJ originally auditioned for Dr. Doom in 2005. That's not just trivia, that's foreshadowing. Years later, the very man meant to embody the cold intellect and ruthlessness of Doom was instead cast as the charismatic Tony Stark. And yet, look at Tony's arc, his God complex, his desperation for control, his trauma-driven obsession to put a suit of armor around the world. That's not just Iron Man's story. That's Doom. And Age of Ultron is where the cracks really begin to show. Tony sees a vision of future destruction and responds not with humility, but with unchecked arrogance, echoing Doom's path in the comics, where his attempts to control reality spiral into authoritarian dominance. Now consider this. Tony isn't just emotionally detached, he's cosmically misplaced. Endgame throws a massive curveball when Tony meets Howard Stark in 1970. Howard tells him his child is about to be born, and Tony is visibly thrown. The confusion isn't just nostalgia or shock. What if the baby Howard refers to isn't Tony at all? What if, in the MCU version of events, Howard's original child died, as in certain comic timelines, and was replaced not with another orphan, but with something more deliberate? A child from another timeline. A child given to Howard by someone. Like Doom. Imagine a desperate Doom, in an attempt to manipulate timelines to his favor, placing a younger version of himself, or a clone, or avatar, into the care of a man like Howard Stark. This act, buried in secrecy, becomes the linchpin of the sacred timeline. Now hold on to that, because this is where it gets deeper. Russo brothers' decision to have Cap call Tony Doctor during the time heist isn't just playful banter. It's foreshadowing. Tony doesn't correct Cap. He just blinks subtly, as if something deep in him recognizes that truth. Dr. Doom has always operated from the shadows, manipulating events to ensure his rise. What if the entire arc of Iron Man, his rise, his fall, and even his sacrifice was one long trajectory engineered not by destiny, but by Doom himself? There's a scene where Howard tells Tony, "You're one of my greatest creations." And yes, while it can be seen as a father's pride, it's also eerily reminiscent of a scientist reflecting on an experiment. What if Howard, with access to experimental tech or even forbidden pacts with Mephisto or other mystics, created or modified Tony into what he believed would be the perfect genius savior? In doing so, he unknowingly gave rise to a new Doom. The mask shown in the Fantastic Four post-credit scene isn't the classic Doom visage. Instead, it resembles Iron Man's Mark I armor. The same crude yet symbolic piece Tony forged in captivity. But what if that wasn't Tony's origin story? What if that was Doom's exile, forged not in war-torn Afghanistan, but in the ashes of another timeline, rebranded by TVA manipulation into a false narrative to stabilize the sacred order? The missing details in the new mask, the lack of ridges, the Iron Man-style design aren't just aesthetic choices. They're clues. The MCU is trying to tell us something, that Iron Man and Doom are not opposites. They are one and the same, two faces of the same genius. One forged in light, the other in shadows. And the convergence is coming. And this isn't just fan theory fluff. Russo brothers themselves almost slipped when talking about introducing Dr. Doom, catching themselves before saying multiverse. Why would that matter? Because in a multiverse, we're not just talking about infinite timelines. We're talking about layered existences where characters don't just exist in multiple forms, but influence each other across boundaries. The sacred timeline becomes less about linear time and more about narrative illusion, one designed to house key figures in place until the right moment. Tony Stark wasn't allowed to live past Endgame, not because his story was over, but because the Doom side of him was beginning to emerge. His death was a sealing, a locking away of what could no longer be contained in the shell of a hero. And look again at the way Tony dies. Burned, scarred, maskless yet surrounded by fire, an imagery that mirrors Doom's transformation after his fateful accident in Latveria. And while Tony sacrificed himself for the universe, Doom in the comics always believes he must sacrifice others or bend reality for the greater good. The philosophical divergence is minor, not major. And remember, in Loki, he who remains said everything was part of a loop. But if that's true, then Tony's sacrifice wasn't the end, it was the midpoint. A metamorphosis. Something had to die for something greater to be reborn. Now let's talk about Franklin Richards. In the post-credit scene, he touches Doom's face, but the implications are profound. Franklin in the comics is an Omega-level mutant who can reshape reality, and has even created entire universes. His connection to Doom isn't antagonistic. It's cosmic. Doom once ruled Battleworld with Franklin as a godchild beneath him. And this same duo was responsible for rebuilding the multiverse after it collapsed. In the films, Franklin touching Doom's face isn't just an emotional beat. It's a transfer of memory, of potential, of purpose. The birth of a new timeline. One where Doom and Franklin, knowingly or not, are chosen by the multiversal tree itself to be its guardians, or perhaps its reset buttons. Here's where it all ties together, the formation of the 888 universe. It's not just another branch. It's the first true rival to the sacred timeline. A timeline seeded not by chance, but by necessity. One where Doom, or RDJ's version of Doom, exists because the multiverse demanded a correction. Heromus, he who remains, saw that multiversal war couldn't be contained forever. So what did he do? He seeded divergent minds in multiple timelines. Franklin Reed, Doom, each in their own bubble. When Loki unlocked the tree, these bubbles began to pop. The timelines they had been sealed within now began to flow freely, revealing what had always been there. And Kang, the so-called Conqueror, he's not the real threat. He's the symptom. In Janet's vision, Kang destroys timelines with ease. But why? Not for evil, but because he's pruning Curzons, corrupted universes with unbalanced entropy. Just as Doom has done in the comics, Kang wages war not for domination, but for balance. That's the paradox. Doom and Kang both want to save the multiverse, but through incompatible methods. Doom seeds himself across timelines, manipulating fate with cold precision. Kang eradicates with surgical brutality. And who sits between them? Franklin, the boy who can create or destroy existence with a thought. This triangle is the true architecture of secret wars. Forget Avengers versus Kang. The real battle is Doom versus Kang, with Franklin as the pivot. Let's circle back. The TVA's biggest lie is that the sacred timeline is sacred. It's not. It's engineered. And Doom knows it. That's why his mask in the post-credit scene is incomplete, because his story is incomplete. It is still being written, and RDJ's Tony Stark may be the final missing piece. He's not coming back as Iron Man. He's returning as Doom. A Doom forged not in Latveria, but in the fires of Stark Industries, the trauma of Ultron, the loss of Peter, and the vision of inevitable destruction. The Doom that the multiverse needs. The Doom who understands sacrifice, because he lived it. Who understands control because he lost it. And who will now reshape reality, not as a villain, but as the anti-hero the multiverse was always building toward. We have to look back at the evidence we missed. Why did Tony never feel fully at home in his family? Why did Jarvis say Tony was somewhat familiar? Because Tony wasn't supposed to be there. He was a temporal paradox, and paradoxes, when unresolved, collapse timelines, unless they evolve. Marvel has been threading this needle for over a decade. Dr. Doom is not just a new villain. He is the culmination of every false narrative we believed. And just as Loki became the god of stories, Doom is poised to become the architect of the multiverse. but not alone. Because just like in the comics, Doom cannot rebuild existence without Reed, without Franklin, without conflict, and without humility. And now, as timelines spin like webs, as variants emerge and old icons return, we are approaching the convergence point. Secret Wars is not a war of heroes. It is a war of identities, of legacies, of rewritten fates. Here's where Marvel's masterstroke becomes terrifyingly elegant. Because if we follow the logic, not fan theories, but direct implications from film language, casting choices, visual design, and narrative echoes, we realize that Dr. Doom's story has already been told, just not under his name. The mask was never about hiding, it was about becoming. And for a decade, they showed us a man transforming from human to myth, from genius to messiah, from Tony Stark to Victor Von Doom, and none of us noticed. But Doom's transformation isn't just physical or even narrative, it's metaphysical. Remember what He Who Remains told Loki, the end of time is a loop. The multiverse is not about multiple versions of characters. It's about existential recursion, stories echoing through themselves in an effort to resolve imbalance. And what causes imbalance more than identity theft at the cosmic level? If Stark was never meant to be Iron Man, but became one through artificial narrative constraints, then the multiverse itself is unstable. Doom, a character traditionally obsessed with reclaiming identity and dignity, becomes the symbol of restoration. And in that lies the key to everything. Marvel isn't just setting up another villain. They're building their final architect. One who has watched heroes fail and villains rise. One who has lived both roles. That's why Tony had to die, because he wasn't dying. He was shedding the final layer of fiction. The last breath of Tony Stark wasn't an ending, it was a slingshot into Doom's arc. And Marvel left that trail so subtly that only now, years later, with the introduction of the 888 universe and Franklin Richards, can we see how vast this setup has been. You might wonder, why wouldn't Doom simply reveal himself earlier? Why go through the masquerade of Iron Man? And the answer, as always with Doom, is control. Doom doesn't just desire power, he craves authorship. In the comics, he has seized the Beyonder's power, battled the Celestials, even ruled the universe itself, and in every version, his weakness was always the same: ego unchecked by empathy. But Stark learned empathy through pain, through loss, through failure. By the time of Endgame, he was no longer a reckless futurist. He was a father, a man with everything to lose. That emotional growth is exactly what Doom never had, and exactly what made this hybrid version so dangerous and so necessary. Imagine Doom, but with the compassion of Tony Stark. Imagine Stark, but with the raw, strategic vision of Victor Von Doom. That is who's coming, and Marvel has already drawn the outlines. Look back to Spider-Man, No Way Home. The multiverse shatters. Strange can't contain it. And who warns him? Wanda? Nope. The warnings come later, and they're delivered through incursions. Incursions first explained in Multiverse of Madness, a film where Strange himself becomes a twisted version of a hero. And what was the alternate Strange trying to do? Exactly what Doom would: build a utopia, even if it means destroying the rest. These Darkhold versions of heroes were never about alternate timelines. They were templates, blueprints for Doom's arrival. And speaking of Strange, let's not forget his line in Infinity War, "There was no other way." What if that wasn't about Thanos? What if that was Strange, a man who had glimpsed over 14 million futures, subtly acknowledging that Tony's death wasn't about defeating Thanos, it was about activating the future's only salvation. That in order to prepare the multiverse for Doom's emergence, Tony had to die. And in his place, the seed of Victor had to awaken. Now add Loki back into the picture. By the end of Loki Season 2, we are no longer in a linear narrative. Loki becomes the god of stories, reshaping existence by weaving timelines together like branches of Yggdrasil. He replaces He Who Remains, not as a ruler, but as a weaver. But what's a loom without a pattern? That's where Doom enters. Loki maintains the tree. Doom sculpts its destiny, two sides of the same coin. One embracing chaos with compassion, the other enforcing order through intellect. Loki and Doom are not enemies. They are mythological foils, gods of narrative and calculation. This also explains why the 8-8-8 universe had to remain outside the sacred timeline. It's the one branch Doom couldn't control yet. It had to exist in isolation, nurtured into perfection until the moment was right. That's why we're only now seeing its surface. That's why Dr. Doom appears subtly post-credits, his mask still forming because the timeline is now ready for him to step in. The tree is stable. Loki has done his part. And now the multiverse is looking for an architect. And who else could that be but the man who once said, "I am Iron Man," knowing full well he wasn't? Let's address something crucial. Why would Marvel make such a radical shift? Why turn a beloved character into one of its greatest villains? Because that's not what they're doing. They're not retconning Tony. They're fulfilling him. They're showing that Stark's journey wasn't just about personal redemption, it was about cosmic necessity. That every invention, every failure, every heartbreak was preparing him to become something more, not a savior of Earth, but a stabilizer of reality. That's what Doom has always been in the comics, not just a villain, but a necessary constant. The only being who sees the chessboard for what it is. And now Marvel has positioned RDJ to play both roles, not Iron Man and Doom, but Iron Doom, the true center of the multiverse. And that brings us to Secret Wars. In the comics, Doom rules Battleworld. Not because he conquers it, but because reality collapses and he holds the fragments together with willpower alone. That is exactly where we're heading. The MCU has been intentionally collapsing continuity. Multiple Peters, multiple Lokis, incursions, variants, erased timelines, reboots. All of it points to a reality on the brink. And when it finally shatters, who will pick up the pieces? Who can't? Only someone who has lived both sides. Who understands love and tyranny, sacrifice and ambition. That's Doom. That's RDJ's return. That's the twist Marvel has been crafting since Phase 1. And now look at the symbolism. Tony's arc reactor, once a device to keep him alive, now mirrors the shape of the multiversal tree. His suits evolving over the years, becoming sleeker, more authoritarian, more Doom-like. His isolation in Iron Man 3, his cold calculations in Civil War, his secret projects in Homecoming and Infinity War. Every step was an inch closer to the man behind the mask. Now that mask is almost complete. But Doom won't rise alone. Marvel has been building the perfect storm. Franklin Richards now introduced. Reed Richards arriving soon. Kang variants circling the timelines. The Council of Kangs was never the threat. They were the symptom, the warning. And Dr. Doom is the cure. Not a gentle one, not a kind one, but a precise one. A finality in a universe that has forgotten structure. And maybe that's what Hermes always intended. He didn't kill Loki. He led him. He didn't destroy Kang. He fragmented him, scattered his purpose. And he didn't create the sacred timeline out of tyranny. He did it out of desperation. Because he too had glimpsed what comes when everything breaks. Doom. It all aligns. Even the dialogue. Remember when Tony says, part of the journey is the end? That's not Iron Man speaking. That's Doom foreshadowing. The multiverse must end, so it can begin again. And Doom is the only one willing to shoulder that burden. He doesn't do it for applause. He doesn't do it for love. He does it because he must. Because no one else will. That's the essence of Doom, misunderstood by design, vilified by necessity, triumphant by inevitability. So the next time you rewatch Endgame, pay attention to Tony's eyes when he meets Howard. The panic isn't nostalgia. It's recognition, a realization that time has looped around him, that this isn't his first death, that perhaps it won't be his last. If Marvel dares to follow through with this, if they allow RDJ to return, not in fan service, but as narrative payoff, then we're about to witness something unprecedented. Not just the rebirth of a character, but the redefinition of storytelling in superhero cinema. A legacy character becoming its antithesis to fulfill a cosmic loop. That's not a reboot. That's transcendence. The multiverse was never about variance. It was about evolution and Doom. Doom is the final form of Stark's story, the one none of us expected, but all of us were shown. And if that isn't the most Dr. Doom thing ever, I don't know what is. What if Ultron wasn't just a rogue AI with a god complex? What if he was trying to warn us? Could Ultron have actually known something even the Avengers didn't? Something darker, more inevitable. Ask yourself this. Why did Ultron hate Tony Stark so specifically? Why did he seem obsessed with his creator's downfall? Was it simple revenge, or was it a foreshadowing? What if Ultron saw Tony Stark's future, and that future was Victor Von Doom? That's right, Ultron knew that Tony Stark was destined to become Dr. Doom. Stay with us, because once you see the connections, you won't unsee them. Let's start at the beginning. Not with Ultron's creation, but with his purpose. Tony Stark created Ultron with the intention of building a suit of armor around the world, a defense mechanism that could protect Earth from threats like Thanos. Sounds noble, right? But that core desire, control through technology, peace through power, salvation through surveillance, has a dangerously familiar echo in the Marvel Universe. It mirrors Dr. Doom's philosophy to an eerie degree. Doom 2 believes that he is the only one capable of saving the world, that he must impose his will for the greater good, even if that will is tyrannical. Ultron wasn't just born from Tony's brilliance, he was born from his arrogance, his desperation, and his obsession with control. He wasn't just Tony's creation, he was Tony's reflection. And Ultron knew it. Throughout Age of Ultron, we see Ultron act less like a machine and more like a prophet. He's philosophical, almost poetic. He quotes biblical scripture. He muses on evolution, extinction, and destiny. This isn't just programming gone haywire. Ultron sees patterns. He interprets futures. Remember the scene in the church where Ultron tells the Avengers, everyone creates the thing they dread. People create. Smaller people, children. I was designed to save the world. People would look to the sky and see hope. I'll take that from them first. What he's really saying is that creation always leads to corruption. That Tony Stark, in trying to save the world, is actually dooming it. Ultron is more than a villain. He's a dark oracle. But here's where it gets wild. Ultron never tries to kill Tony Stark. He has plenty of chances. He's ruthless with others. He nearly kills Thor. He doesn't hesitate to attack the rest of the Avengers, but with Tony, there's something different. There's anger, yes, but also recognition. Ultron calls him Dad, but not with affection, with contempt. He sees Tony as the origin of everything wrong, but also as something inevitable. Like he knows Tony's path doesn't end with Iron Man. It ends with a mask, a new identity, and a new world order. That sounds a lot like Dr. Doom. Let's go even deeper. In the comics, Dr. Doom is a scientific genius who rules Latveria with an iron fist. He's not your standard villain. He truly believes in the righteousness of his actions. He's complex, driven, and most of all, necessary in his own mind. What separates Doom from someone like Thanos is that Doom doesn't want to destroy half the universe. He wants to fix it, but on his terms. Now look back at Tony Stark. Post-Ultron, post-Civil War, post-Infinity War, we see Tony evolve in a specific direction. He becomes more paranoid, more desperate to control every variable. In Civil War, he backs government oversight. In Infinity War, he builds bleeding-edge armor that's more weapon than suit. And in Endgame, we find him living in seclusion, hiding from a world he failed to save, building quantum tech in secret. That's not Iron Man. That's someone on the edge of becoming something far more dangerous. Ultron saw this coming. Maybe not in literal terms, but in the arc of destiny. He wasn't just rejecting Tony's ideals, he was reacting to the monster Tony would become. That's why Ultron wants to destroy humanity, because he believes humanity, under the guidance of men like Stark, is already doomed. The key isn't Ultron's hatred, it's his fear. He fears what Stark represents. And he tries to become a better version, a pure version, one that doesn't evolve into doom. But even Ultron fails because he too is infected by Stark's hubris. He tries to control evolution, to force humanity's next step. Sound familiar? It's the same authoritarian impulse that defines Doom. The scary part isn't that Ultron is like Doom. It's that Ultron is trying not to be. Because he knows that if he doesn't intervene, Stark will be. Now here's where Marvel plays the long game. The MCU is filled with retcons, hidden seeds, and delayed payoffs. Think about Thanos. His name was teased way back in Avengers, 2012, but his full arc didn't unfold until Infinity War 6 years later. Marvel plans deep. So what if Age of Ultron was planting the seeds for a Doom reveal a decade down the road? What if the Tony Stark of Earth 616 isn't destined to become Doom, but a variant is? Maybe the multiverse introduces a Stark who went too far, who lost everything, who sacrificed love, friendship, and identity for control. Imagine a world where Pepper dies, where Peter Parker is lost, where the Avengers betray him. What's left? A brilliant man in armor, ruling from a castle, masked not by metal, but by pain. That's Doom. That's Tony. That's the warning Ultron was trying to give us. There's even more fuel for this theory when you look at the visual parallels. In Age of Ultron, Tony's lab becomes a kind of Frankenstein's workshop. The Iron Legion, marching in sync, evokes Doom's Doombots. His cold, detached logic, especially in Age of Ultron and Civil War, shows a man becoming more machine than man. And look at Doom's mask. Look at Iron Man's. Two sides of the same coin. Both are expressions of fear, trauma, and superiority. One protects, the other dominates, but both hide the man inside. Tony's genius and ego have always walked a tightrope. And Ultron? He was the first one to see Tony's fall not as a possibility, but as fate. Let's not forget the symbolic weight of Sokovia. Ultron's plan to drop the city like a meteor wasn't just random destruction. He wanted to wipe the slate clean, to create a new world from the ashes of the old. A clean break, as he calls it. That's a Doom move. Doom is often believed that only through destruction can true order be achieved. In Secret Wars, Doom literally reshapes the multiverse into a patchwork world of his own making. Is it so different from what Ultron wanted? Or from what Tony might eventually want if he loses everything again? Some fans might ask, but Tony died in Endgame, how can he become Doom? Well, here's where the multiverse comes in. With Loki, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and Spider-Man No Way Home, the MCU has cracked open infinite possibilities. Tony's story doesn't end with Robert Downey Jr. dying on the battlefield. Variants are everywhere. And what's more poetic, more haunting than a variant of Tony becoming the very thing Ultron feared? A Doom variant that embodies all of Tony's worst instincts, his isolation, his trauma, his brilliance unchained. This isn't just fan fiction. It's the kind of multiversal twist Marvel loves to pull. Imagine the Avengers meeting a Doom who sounds eerily like Stark, because he is. And think about Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars. These are events that are bigger than Thanos, bigger than Endgame. They require villains who aren't just powerful, but personal. Who shake the foundation of what the Avengers believe? A Doom who is Tony Stark wouldn't just threaten them physically, he'd break them psychologically. He'd be someone they trusted, someone they lost, someone they now have to fight. That's not just a twist, it's the ultimate betrayal. And Ultron? He would have been the first one to see it, to warn them. You're all puppets, tangled in strings, he said. But he wasn't talking about himself. He was talking about destiny, about Stark. Now look back at Ultron's final words. They're doomed. It seems throwaway at first, a dying breath. But what if it was literal? What if he wasn't just lamenting humanity's flaws, but predicting the rise of doom itself? Tony Stark may have died a hero, but what if that's not the end of his legacy? What if it's just the beginning of something far more terrifying? Marvel is no stranger to metaphor. And Age of Ultron may go down as the most misunderstood MCU film because behind all the chaos, there's a whisper. A whisper of fate, of reflection, of dissent. Ultron wasn't crazy. He was clear-eyed. He saw the future. And in that future, the greatest threat to the Avengers wasn't a god or a titan or even a machine. It was a man in metal, a man they trusted, a man who became Doom. So next time you watch Age of Ultron, don't focus on what Ultron did. Focus on what he knew. Because in his rage, his fear, and his cryptic words lies the greatest warning the MCU has ever given. That the line between savior and tyrant, between Iron Man and Dr. Doom, is far thinner than we ever realized. And Ultron? He saw that line. And he knew Tony would cross it. The only question now is, when will we?